Hello, everyone. Welcome to the mental health webinar series. Today is our last webinar. And last but not least, we have Carlos Laurrari with us today. And I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you. I'm very grateful. Carlos is a nurse practitioner, psychiatric nurse practitioner, board certified, and family nurse practitioner. He serves on the board of directors for the National Alliance on Mental Illness and NAMI Miami-Dade County. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia at the age of 23, and access to affordable health care, community-based treatments, and early intervention afforded him the best opportunity for recovery. Mr. Laurrari is board certified as a family nurse practitioner and as a psychiatric health nurse practitioner, and formerly lectured at University of Miami and Miami-Dade College. Mr. Laurrari is currently pursuing a concurrent law degree and master's in public policy at the University of Michigan Law School and the Harvard Kennedy School as a Zuckerman Fellow. He aspires to interface clinical practice, health policy, and research to reduce health inequities for people living with mental illness. If you want to learn more about Carlos and his work, you can visit his website, carloslaurrari.com, or his Twitter account at Laurrari_Carlos. And all of that information will be on this website under presenters. You can always go back and his link is there. And he is offering his time for us and volunteering, but he does a lot of public speaking and engagements. He will stay with us for a few questions during the question and answer, and he will leave after a few questions, and then we will continue with the question and answers. But during this time, I welcome Carlos, and we're gonna turn off our cameras and microphones to allow him to do his presentation. Thank you again, Carlos.
Sure, thank you, Maria. It really is my sincere pleasure to be here today. I don't think I would be where I am today if it wasn't for the education I received at Miami-Dade College. It allowed me to pursue nursing and become a clinician as a nurse practitioner and continue onward in pursuit of my goals and aspirations of helping this community. So again, thank you, Maria. And so without further ado, I'll begin my presentation, Being Human, Recovery from Schizophrenia and the Role of Peer Support. So I'll start with a short video that kind of shares my story in a nutshell, and then I'll go over a roadmap of exactly what we'll be talking about today. All right. So here's a little short video of my story.
1, 2, 3. In my senior year of college, that's when I really had a psychotic and manic episode, totally isolating myself from my peers, wandering campus talking to myself, just rambling incoherently and not showering and not doing my classwork or doing my thesis. And there was that manic sort of endless energy, basically becoming, homeless, mentally ill person on campus. I didn't have the coping skills to reach out to resources, to seek a professional, to eventually calling my mom in my second semester and saying, I gotta come home. When I was ultimately diagnosed with schizophrenia, and looking back in adolescence, I started experimenting with drugs. I think that was a means for coping with emotional issues I didn't know how to verbalize, like trying to find a peer group, trying to find a subculture, making music, identifying as a musician. I'm singing songs about my trauma, about my psychosis. Certainly haven't settled for less because of my diagnosis with schizophrenia. Learning to make sense of the experience and being able to talk about it, I think there was a genuine spiritual and experience in psychosis. I would offer, I think, the same advice that was given to me, that you may develop an illness. This may be very difficult, but your life can still go on. You can still live the life you want to live.
So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. Briefly, Strong 365 is a great resource for other people to meet other young people who have gone through similar experiences, and that's the music my band Fog Dog. So here's what we'll talk about today. I'll share my story, from the beginning, my childhood years, which were pretty normal, and the onset of mental health issues in my teenage years and young adult years, which is typically when they happen, and to the overt presentation of serious mental illness in college. I'll discuss my recovery, what kind of helped me from a policy perspective, access to healthcare, early intervention, and community-based treatments. And then I'll discuss something that I like to advocate for, which is peer support. I'll explain what it is, how it works, and the role of peer support in recovery. And I think in this way, I'll explain how peer support is a mechanism for Miami-Dade College students and faculty alike to thrive and flourish and experience the wonderfulness that is being human. So I'm like many of you, I'm a first generation United States citizen as the son of Cuban American immigrants. I had I think a very healthy and normal upbringing. I had a private school education. I had summer vacations. I played in Little League sports. As you can see, I had a Nintendo and PlayStation and all the privileges of a middle class upbringing. My parents did use corporal punishment, which I think is normal in the context of their background and culture. But when we think about prophylactic, preventative measures for how we can avoid mental health issues or health issues down the road, we could think of this as an adverse childhood experience. And we know that adverse childhood experiences are strongly correlated with future health issues and mental health issues, and sometimes even criminal justice involvement. Again, my upbringing was very much privileged, and I have a great relationship with my parents. But when we think about how we can prevent stuff, this is one avenue that we could think about and talk about. All right. So I was always good in school. I love being a student. I love learning. I have an enormous appetite for that. And in high school, I was still doing pretty well. I was graduating Killian summa cum laude. I had done a year at the School for Advanced Studies at the Kendall campus. The best, I was a National Hispanic Scholar for my PSAT scores. And the best opportunity I had was an early admissions program for medical school at Ohio State University. It was a pretty sweet deal. I only had to maintain like a 3.2 GPA, and I could skip out on taking the MCATs, and I was guaranteed a seat at their medical school. So even though there was the beginning of mental health issues in my teenage years, I was still, achieving and functioning at a level consistent with my capacities. But there were these changes that happened during my teenage years. I started becoming a little bit more introspective. I started isolating from myself and associating and trying to find my sense of identity, trying to individualize myself through identifying with peers and subcultures. I identified as a hippie, for example, for a while there, as you can see by my hair. And among other things, I did become a user I did start using marijuana and other substances. Again, when we think about prophylactic ways, preventative ways of dealing with mental health issues, definitely there's a relationship between the use of marijuana and psychosis, especially earlier onset use and more frequent use and higher potency THC use. So, avoiding the introduction of substances into the developing mind or the brain is one way that we can again possibly avoid mental health issues down the road. But it was really in my college years that the overt crisis occurred. I struggled at Ohio State when I left. My first semester, in my first year of college, my GPA dropped to 1.8, the lowest GPA I've ever had. I slept in, I skipped my classes, I gained significant weight. I think in retrospect, I went through like an untreated episode of depression, which is not uncommon. Usually people don't just struggle with one mental health issue. Comorbidity is the norm. So that means they also, you might have psychosis and you might also have anxiety or depression, or you might have depression and also have possibly obsessive compulsive disorder or other things. So these illnesses kind of bundle together, if you will. But so by my senior year, by my freshman year at Ohio State, I asked my mom if I wanted to come back home, if I could come back home, and I did come back home, and I got better amongst my family and my support network in Miami. but I left again to complete my undergraduate degree at New College of Florida. But by my senior year of college, I began becoming floridly psychotic. I was eating out of trash cans at some points. I was picking cigarettes off the ground, and I was beginning to lose touch with reality. I was very much becoming, a homeless person on campus. I started hearing voices commenting on my situation, asking what's up, what's going on. I started becoming religiously preoccupied. Other symptoms of schizophrenia and psychosis. There's a couple buckets of symptoms. There's positive symptoms, which aren't good, but they're the addition of something that's not there, like hallucinations or delusions. There's also negative symptoms, which are the subtraction of things that are normally there, like a lack of motivation or a lack of pleasure in activities. And there's also cognitive symptoms, trouble focusing and concentrating, and stuff like that. And I started to experience the variety of those symptoms by my senior year. Fortunately for me, I was able to have a good recovery, and that was definitely facilitated by these kind of three things I want to touch on from a policy perspective, which was, first, having access to healthcare. Considering how many people we still have underinsured or uninsured in the United States, we can do a lot of good by expanding access to insurance. So for me, fortunately, I had health insurance coverage because the Affordable Care Act required that plans offer coverage until an adult child reaches the age of 26. And as you can see from my photo, I had a close relationship, and I do have a close relationship with my mom, and she was able to advocate for me. We spent at least 6 months seeing a dozen of mental health professionals in a variety of settings, in private practice and hospital-based. Some were good, some were not so good. I remember getting a diagnosis from one doctor who, in his machismo, said I only needed to cortar caña, which means cut cane, and that was kind of, how an example of how kind of the stigma and sometimes the machismo in our Hispanic culture can be an actual barrier to care. Nevertheless, I had a good family friend who's a psychiatrist and professor at Harvard, who my mom called, and my mom said, Carlos is having these issues in school, and I wanted your opinion about what's going on. He asked a couple questions. Was there, marijuana use? How was his, grades and academic performance, and how was his music? And my music at the time became, like my mind, very disorganized. I would kind of incoherently play the guitar without any melody or harmony, and I'd get stuck on chords, just like reflecting my mental state at the time, which was becoming very disorganized. He, said, I think this is what's going on. I think it might be, schizophrenia, but you should still do your due diligence and go see a team of doctors at the University of Miami to get a diagnosis. So we went and we saw an interdisciplinary team at the University of Miami, and I got, family-based care. My parents were there, and they were able to explain what was going on. And it was just a couple days or shy of my 23rd birthday that I was diagnosed with adult onset schizophrenia. Obviously, that was a very, heavy moment, but it was a turning point. Once you know what you're up against, you can, begin to arm yourself, if you will, with the tools to recover, which in my case were education and learning about the illness and how to manage it. So this slide just represents the fact that, most people don't get the care that I get, which was critical in my recovery. Roughly a fifth of adolescents and children have a mental health disorder, and of that population, of that fifth, only about a fifth are getting care or actually receiving mental health care. So the unmet need for mental health care is very high, especially amongst children and adolescents. Another critical feature of my recovery was that I had an early intervention. Just like with other medical conditions, early intervention is critical. It's the same with mental health conditions. I went to go see the school psychologist at New College, but we failed to identify the severity of the issue. We talked about what was going on. I was having trouble completing routine assignments. I couldn't concentrate and focus. I was having trouble staying asleep. I would be up all night talking to myself and rhyming to myself and what are called loose associations. Yet we didn't identify the severity of the issue and intervene. Fortunately for me, though, I had a family friend at the time who I had known since middle school, who we went to the same college together, and we were roommates at one point, and she knew something was off. She called my mother and said, something's happening with Carlos here. I think you should talk to him. And my mom and I spoke, and I was forthcoming about the issues I was starting to have in college, and she immediately came to campus. And within a couple of days, I had a meeting with my mother and my academic advisor at the time, Dr. Clark. And Dr. Clark said, Carlos, you're an adult. You have the right to privacy. You don't have to share anything that's happened to you on campus in the past several semesters. And in a rare moment of insight or seeing the frustration on my mom's face, I said, with all due respect, Dr. Clark, I have a Cuban mother. I've never had the right to privacy. So, all kidding aside, that was a moment that was a turning point. It allowed for a frank and honest conversation about my mental health issues at college. And it's often so important that we have a support network, whether it's friends or family that we're in touch with to get us the care we need during these episodes. So, for me, I had that early intervention because of my support network of friends and family. And it was approximately a year to a year and a half between the onset of psychotic symptoms and treatment with prescription medication. This is actually a pretty good outcome. In some cases, the literature suggests it's as high as years, 6, 7, 8 years. I've heard a decade or longer between the onset of mental health issues. But for me, between the onset of the florid psychosis and getting access to medication, it was only about a year, year and a half. And with that, I began to gain insight. If you had asked me at the time what was going on, I would have told you I was perfectly fine, even though I was, struggling academically and unable to hold a job, and my social relationships were deteriorating, and there was a lot of trauma that was being triggered at home. I would have told you everything was still great, and I had no self-awareness about what was happening with myself and my condition. But with access to medication, there was a light bulb that went off, and I began to see my condition for what it is, which is a serious and chronic medical condition that requires treatment. And with that, one of the first things I did was read as much as I could about schizophrenia so I could learn how to manage it. And of course, one of the things I learned being very critical to recovery was that taking medication is one of the most critical aspects of the recovery process. It prevents you from relapsing and from being hospitalized. So this is a slide which I'll just very briefly summarize. Basically, the point of the slide is to suggest that the shorter the period of psychosis, the better the outcomes. So it's just like any health condition. We don't want to wait till people have heart disease to the stage that they're having strokes or having heart attacks. We want to treat it early on, and we do that by measuring blood pressure and putting people on statins and recommending lifestyle change that allows them to treat their heart condition. Well, it's the same for mental health. We don't want to wait until people are having acute, psychotic episodes and their behavior is strange and they may get involved with the criminal justice system or things like that. We need the scientific tools, which we don't have yet, to kind of be able to determine who's at risk and predict if they're going to convert to psychosis, and then intervene early, because again, the shorter the period of duration of psychosis, the better the outcome is for the individual going through the first episode. And the more episodes a person has, conversely, the more challenging it becomes for that person to achieve their baseline level of functioning and live the quality of life they want to live. It's kind of like a rubber band. The more you stretch out the rubber band, the more you lose its original elasticity. The more you have these episodes the more residual cognitive defects or issues the brain might have, and that'll impact your functioning. And another critical part of my recovery was, receiving community-based treatment. Again, I'm very fortunate that, my first encounter with mental health treatment was not the back of a cop car, was not a crisis stabilization unit. And I'm only fortunate, but for the grace of God, not by any will of my own, but because I just got lucky and because I had family that was there to intervene early enough. But it's important that people have access to treatment and rehabilitation and support services within the community. Often these illnesses, unlike other illnesses, they leave you marginalized. People with cancer or with diabetes are not often in homeless shelters or under the streets, at least not the rate that people with mental illness are. So there's a degree of social marginalization that occurs with mental illness. So an important part of recovery is also integrating once in, into your community as much as possible, and receiving those treatments in the community is critical to that. So the best practice model now is coordinated specialty care for schizophrenia, which kind of brings together all these different tools, including therapy, case management, peer support, supported education, employment, family support, education, and evidence-based psychopharmacotherapy. For me, my recovery has been, the most critical features about for my recovery have been what I call, my mom and my meds. Moms and meds are sometimes the most critical part. Meds and then it's necessary, to manage a chronic condition such as schizophrenia. But I say it's necessary, but it's often not sufficient. It's often not enough. We need more than just medications. And for me, my mom was my advocate, the one that advocated for me to get access to care and get the initial treatment I needed. And then once I was able to take the reins of my recovery, I was able to seek the services that were best for me to achieve my goals and live the quality of life that I want to have, which have been of this list here that I particularly rely on, have been supportive school and work. I'm very fortunate that I've been able to continue my education and at institutions such as Miami-Dade College and University of Miami, for example, where I've been able to be honest about my lived experience. And in fact, I've been invited to the classroom to share my story and help others and hopefully inspire others. I've been able to make sense of my experience and my suffering by serving others. I think that's it's an important part of this recovery, as well as to make sense of your experience, to kind of form your own narrative and your own meaning. And I've been able to do so by helping others primarily, and by affiliating with the NAMI National, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. That's provided great also career opportunities and professional opportunities. And lastly, peer support has been critical for me. I have a best buddy of mine who shares the same lived experience, and it's been a really meaningful relationship to be able to share this journey with someone else, and because of it, we've been able to help each other and create something positive from our experience, which has been our music, our art. So, this is me and my mom again, my biggest advocate, and the most important part of my recovery, besides my medications, probably. And the purpose of these few pictures coming up is to kind of show you that people with schizophrenia can live normal lives and thrive and do well. This is me graduating from the University of Miami. Again, I'm very fortunate that I've been able to go to schools like Miami-Dade College and University of Miami, where I've been able to, receive accommodations and also to succeed academically, and also to share my lived experience in the classroom to help future students and colleagues alike. This is me working for Judge Leifman and Sydney Shorts in the jail diversion program. I've had some tremendous professional experiences. One of my first jobs was with the jail diversion program, which diverts individuals with mental health issues from the criminal justice system into treatment. And it was a place where I could bring my full self to bear at the employment setting. They wanted people with lived experience to be there. And it was very cool to be part of an organization that valued that and saw that as something that added value, and not as a liability or as something to be stigmatized. This is me, just living a normal life. I think all that we want to do at the end of the day is to love and work, and that is the same for people with mental health issues. This is me advocating in Washington, D.C. with NAMI National. Again, it's been important for me to have that community of like-minded people, and I think I get a lot of people that reach out to me struggling during their early process of their recovery, and the first thing I tell them is to go get involved with NAMI. There's no other better place to be that's going to value and dignify your experience as someone living with a mental health issue, and it's also going to provide great professional opportunities. For me, that's been the opportunity to be a board of directors for a $30 million nonprofit, and to get involved with policy and science at the highest level with the National Institute of Mental Health and things like that.
Hi. This is that mental health thing.
David, I'll ask you to go on mute if possible. And this is me trying to, live a normal life by being exercising and staying fit and healthy. it's a challenge with these medications. You know, the antipsychotics can cause serious weight gain and metabolic abnormalities like high cholesterol and hypertension and high blood pressure, things like that. But it's important to do what you can, because this is an active recovery process. It's not like you just sit back and have a doctor put a cast on you for a couple months, or you just take an antibiotic for a couple weeks. You do have to kind of change your lifestyle, change the community you associate with at times, and create a new lifestyle to have the best chance at living well in recovery. So for the last part of my presentation, I want to discuss briefly, what is peer support? Again, this is one of the more critical aspects of my recovery personally, and it's something I like to advocate for. And I think this is a tool that everyone at this presentation can have access to, that can improve their lives and allow people to thrive and flourish. But peer support is essentially something we all do on a common sense way. If you want to buy a new car, you talk to someone who wants to buy a new car. If you want to start a family, you talk to someone who wants to start a family. So peer support in the medical context connects people living with chronic condition, and they share their knowledge and experiences that sometimes healthcare professionals or workers do not have. It could take many forms. It could take phone calls, text messages, group meetings, home visits, going for walks together, grocery shopping, helping with errands. But the key is that it's a non-hierarchical relationship. It's a reciprocal relationship, meaning both people get something from it, and non-hierarchical, and that everyone's on the same level, and provides a flexible supplement to formal health system services. So this is something in addition to your relationship with your psychotherapist or with your psychiatrist or prescribing psychiatric provider. And it is an evidence-based model of mental health care. And you can visit SAMHSA or Peers for Progress to look at the literature if you're interested in the evidence base. This is, so how does it work? This is me and my best buddy and my source of peer support and our band together, Frog Dog. It's based on a relationship where the primary, where trust is built, and that's the primary mechanism for the success of the peer relationship. This relationship is built through establishing a personal connection and through talking and listening. And through this trusting relationship, people become role models for recovery for other people living with mental health conditions, and they also help people engage with mental health services in the community. The added challenge in the mental health space that makes peer support a little different and difficult compared to the other context I was speaking of, such as purchasing a car, starting a family, is that we have the stigma, and that makes people scared to share their stories or to talk about it or to listen to other people. But this is really a critical pathway for getting better. This is, I'll just explain this simply. This is a kind of model, but again, you have a relationship that's built on talking and listening. And then through that, the mechanisms of change occur by role modeling recovery, by seeing is believing. So once you meet your role models and you see role models in your professional career and so forth, you also need those role models in recovery. And also by helping the person get services. Maybe it's helping the person say, hey, I applied for accommodations in school and that was helpful. Maybe you should try this as well. Or, I know this great support group and maybe you should try that as well. And then through that, there's a therapeutic relationship that's formed. People can process the stigma or discrimination that they face in the real world, or the self-stigma that they impose upon themselves, which is very real and just as damaging. But downstream, the hope is that people, the result is that people get more hopeful, that they feel empowered, that their social functioning increases, that their self-care increases, that they engage with services and they build a more robust support network. And ultimately, this leads to recovery and well-being and using the services that's necessary to manage these conditions. So, the evidence says that it works. It decreases morbidity and mortality. It decreases associated illnesses and so forth. Increases life expectancy. Increases knowledge of the disease. Improves self-efficacy. Reduces use of emergency services such as ER or hospital usage. And for the people that provide peer support, they often report less depression, high in self-esteem and self-efficacy, and improved quality of life. So as far as my conclusions and takeaways for today, if there's one thing I leave you with today in a nutshell is share your story. You know, we help each other recover and live healthier lives through sharing our lived experiences. And again, this is a little, more challenging in the mental health context because of that stigma, and that can be a barrier, but it makes it all the more critical and necessary. For me, recovery was made possible by increasing access to healthcare, including early intervention and community-based treatment. And lastly, peer support is a way to improve people's outcomes and can help address the shortage of mental health professionals. It helps people achieve and sustain recovery, and it's certainly been true in my case. And again, I think this is a tool that everyone at this talk could use that can help them, live a life where they thrive and experience the wonderfulness that's possible. So with that, there's some resources. If you're interested in learning more about this, these are some resources. And otherwise, I want to thank you all again for listening and for letting me share my story. And, I have some time now to answer a few questions. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos. That was amazing. You are amazing. I am so happy that you are here and did this wonderful organized presentation. Kudos to you. I'm so proud because I saw you years ago at Jackson. That was the last time I saw you when you were teaching for UM. And I was teaching for Miami-Dade. And I remember when you were finishing your bachelor's at Miami-Dade. And you said to me, I want to be a psych nurse practitioner. And I started. You got to go to Horace Ellis at Jackson. Did you ever go do your internship with him?
Yeah, I remember meeting him. Yes, that's correct.
Wow. So you've come such a long way. I'm so impressed. Thank you so much. This is going to help many people because a lot of people are going to watch this recording, and all of those resources that you placed there, I'm going to put them on our resource list as well. Because we have a resource tab. I'm going to add all of those additional resources if we don't have them there to make sure that, people